Dobar dan svima. Atlantski savez Srbije organizuje debatu na
Atlantic Council of Serbia is organizing the topic discussion initiated by the USA and Embassy in Belgrade. Today we are going to talk about the importance and the level of cooperation of both parties, Serbia and NATO. From the NATO point of view, we are talking about neutrality. On the 6th March, we had the last project that the Atlantic Council made with in cooperation with the American Embassy. The topic was the relationship of Serbia and USA throughout the history. And this conference was opened by His Excellency, the Ambassador of the USA to Belgrade, to Serbia, Mr. Godfrey, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ivica Dačić. I'm mentioning this conference because on that very day, on the 6th of March, we announced that coronavirus has actually come to Serbia, and after 3 months already of our inactivity, almost 3 months was the time that was necessary for combating and during this period, we lost one of the founders of Atlantic Council, Professor Dr. Dragan Markovic, and with sorrow we remember his work and his contribution. He lost this battle on the 16th of April, and if he's watching and looking upon us from somewhere, we are greeting him. The Ambassador, Mr. Godfrey, I would like to thank him especially because he showed special care for following up with this Atlantic Council of Serbia work. And I want to greet the students that are following this event, especially the students of the law school from, economy and judiciary, Professor Bojic and his students, our colleagues and friends from Atlantic Council throughout Europe, especially from the region, and the Youth Atlantic Council Association, Diplomatic Corps, our colleagues, our friends from the NGO. Now, let me present our honorable guests, participants in this debate. We have here Mr. Tomasso Vitale, Brigadier General Tomasso Vitale, the Military Liaison Officer, Professor Minister Kostic from the Ministry, political and international affairs commentator, an analyst, Bosko Jaksic, a famous, renowned journalist. We can start immediately with our debate and our discussion. The first question would be given to the Chief of NATO MLO, Brigadier General Tomasso Vitale. You were appointed Chief MLO in January this year. What does it mean to you to represent NATO in Serbia? Can you tell us more about the office you lead? What is its purpose in Belgrade? And what does it represent for NATO and for Serbia as well?
Veliko vam hvala, gospodine Zivulovic, and hvala to the entire Atlantic Council of Serbia for organizing this interesting, I will sure be an interesting one, discussion, and for your kind invitation. It's a real privilege and a pleasure for me to be here this morning. And let me also congratulate you and all the Atlantic Council for the outstanding job you are doing, which I guess is not an easy one. And I will really hope you will continue in the future with the same dedication and enthusiasm you have shown in the past 20 years now. As you said, I arrived in Belgrade last January this year, and I have to say, frankly speaking, it was really an unexpected and very nice, I would say, Christmas gift, because it's happened very close under the Christmas tree, I would say. And I'm really honored to be appointed on this position and to be in such an important and beautiful country as Serbia, so rich culture and historical tradition. When I arrived, I received a very, very, very warm welcome for Serbian people, and I feel very comfortable immediately. I had on the others, and before the start of outbreak of COVID-19, the opportunity to meet the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dacic, the Minister of Defense, Vulin, and they all made me feel very welcome, and I really appreciate that. If we are talking about the office, I can say that it's composed of several officers coming from different NATO member countries and civilian staff. I have to say that I found excellent professional, and I'm really proud to be their leader. A particular thank, if I may, goes to my civilian staff. They are helping me a lot in providing very well advice in order to better understand Serbia and its people. And my arrival in some way coincided with the adoption of the Individual Partnership Action Plan the Serbia government adopted late last year. This is a plan that provided a very good and important guidance in the way we can put our cooperation forward in order to, I would say, better meet the needs of both NATO and Serbia. This plan encompasses a so huge quantity of activity that are tailor-made in order to better suit Serbian needs, and obviously based on the clearly defined policy of Serbia regarding its military neutrality that we fully respect and we consider of fundamental importance. This kind of cooperation started in 2006 when Serbia joined the Partnership of Peace program and the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council. And I would say that since then, I was working in NATO headquarters at the time. A lot of job had been done, and we found this kind of cooperation absolutely outstanding. And the NATO Military Office, Liaison Military Office in Belgrade was actually established in 2006, just and exactly in order to try to facilitate these projects, and even, if possible, to strengthen it. And we can say that NATO highly values its cooperation with Serbia because we consider a key actor in the whole region in promoting peace and stability. Also, Serbian public opinion had the opportunity to see how our NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and President Aleksandar Vučić get along very well in advancing their political engagement. And so that allows me to say that I have an immense respect for this country, and I really hope, and I sincerely hope to do my best in order to facilitate the progression of this kind of cooperation. And I really would like to try to help my Serbian friend in building up their capability and capacity of the Serbian armed forces, because there is in our interest to have an important actor in promoting peace and stability in the region. And the reason for we have to put this cooperation forward is they can make us stronger in order to better face the new challenges, the new security challenges of the current situation. And let me finish simply saying fundamentally two things. So the first one is whatever we are doing with Serbia, we as a NATO organization, fully respect its sovereignty and its neutrality policy, military neutrality policy. And then there is a fundamental reason, because we are so deeply engaged in working on reaching the best goal as possible in the field of cooperation and partnership, and because we are neighbors. And when neighbors share security concern, when they work together on them, I really think that we are, all of us, are safer and more prosperous. And that could be the general idea that should lead my activity during the period that I hope will be the most fruitful one.
Thank you.
Mike, nisu uključili mikrofon. Mr. Kostic, Serbia has its mission to NATO in Brussels. You have worked there for 4 years. You represented Serbian interests. We'd like to hear from you. Since you're back, you're working in the ministry, as I already said, in the office dealing with NATO and the Partnership for Peace. Can you tell us something more about the relationship between NATO and Serbia, and how would you describe them? Thank you, Mr. Zivulovic. In the very beginning, I would like to say, on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to thank to the Atlantic Council of Serbia for the organization of this event, and to send you the greetings from the Minister, Mr. Dačić. Oh, well, as the introductory, I'd like to say that partnership between Serbia and NATO are a very important element of the state policy of this country, and our efforts to make this region stable permanently. These relationships are relying on very firm premises, including partnership cooperation based on the policy of neutrality, then connections between Serbia and the aliens, NATO aliens, and the openness to improve political dialogue and cooperation with NATO on a practical line in all the fields. The improvement of this cooperation includes the discussions on the highest level, on the top level, between Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, the visits, contacts at international events, but also through the contacts of other levels of military cooperation. For Serbia, NATO is inevitable collocutor for many reasons. One of them is, since this is the most powerful political association or alliance in the world, almost all our neighbors are either members of NATO or aspire to become one. And what is essential also is that in our territory we have international forces, say KFOR under command of NATO, in line with the resolution of Council 1244. As the General mentioned in his speech, at the beginning of November last year, NATO and Serbia adopted a new second cycle of Individual Action Plan of Partnership, or IPP, for the period 2019 until the 2021. This new IPAP represents the continuance of the first cycle that has been successfully implemented, and many activities have found their place in the new document, taking into consideration their long-lasting character. By adoption of the new IPAP, once again we confirmed the growing improvement in the relationship between our country and NATO, and the dedication to the common interests. The fact is that the relationship between NATO and Serbia are delicate because of the heritage from the past. The events are such that we cannot forget them. However, the events that we on one side say are marked as NATO campaign, and clearly from our perspective they are NATO aggression, still evoke different points of view. However, as it was confirmed many times in the past, we both have obligation to do anything we can to provide the long-lasting stability in this region. Our activities include military and other exercises with the countries that are not members of the NATO. They do not damage in any way our relationship with NATO and their members, and vice versa. All activities relating to defense are targeted towards concrete, immediate interests to cooperate in the domain of defense policy and our needs. First of all, to strengthen our capacity of military forces, armed forces in different areas. When we talk about cooperation between Serbia and NATO through the Partnership for Peace, majority of media and majority of public think that this is only the military cooperation in question. It's been realized through different programs of defense sector, aiming at achieving the interoperability, which is really important for our participation in multinational operations and missions. They are realized, they are implemented in the past in terms of trusts and funds that are supporting this cooperation. But this cooperation is much wider than this. It includes some civilian aspects of cooperation. By this, I first of all mean the activity of Serbia when it comes to NATO programs, its participation in science for peace and safety and defense, security, including scientific and technological cooperation, very important program of the building up integrity, dedicated towards strengthening the transparency, combating corruption in the defense system, and the activities relating to gender equality in the system of defense by implementing Resolution 1325 of the Council of Defense of the UN. Especially important area of cooperation is the extraordinary situations that actually we have seen very recently in the present pandemic of coronavirus. I want to stress that priorities of Serbia when it comes to cooperation with NATO, understandable, will spread, that many stereotypes that exist will be eliminated in the future. And let me say that partnership cooperation and between Serbia and NATO has its future through the partnership relationship that in each and every area can be expanded with the agreement of both parties for the interest of reaching joint interests. That is, first of all, stability and security. That would be for now, for the beginning. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kostic. Mr. Jaksic, we have now had two opinions coming from institutions.
You as an independent, how do you see this cooperation? Do you think that this cooperation is presented in the right way in the public? Can you tell us how you see the people, whether they are well informed, those who are not directly involved in these issues? Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to say a few things or my impressions. Surely I'm not the representative sample for this topic because I know a bit about the cooperation between Serbia and NATO. And contrary to majority of the citizens who are not really aware of anything, and what they know is mostly negative. 2 decades have passed, and the mantra NATO has bombed Serbia is something that is mostly used in public debates as an argument for preventing any form of cooperation. Surely, it is well known that the government, the authorities are controlling the information which should shape the public opinion. The fact is, or that's my impression at least, that positioning of Serbia in global relations is somehow vague, not clearly defined, and that it does not refer not only to NATO, but an average citizen, how much does he or she know about the essence of EU, about the values, EU values, values of liberal democracy, the values of strong institutions, rule of law, whether the Serbian citizen in the country that officially aims at becoming the EU member, is he or she aware that they have collective defense that is actually named NATO? Also, when it comes to the relationship with the United States of America for the past 2 decades, we mostly had negative perception of the United States until quite recently, when the Serbian leadership recognized the possibility that Donald Trump's administration can become a good interlocutor in resolving the Kosovo issues. There are also some other messages being sent. Everything that we have heard when the president of Serbia received Chinese aid in this pandemic period, later the Russian assistance and aid, although this welcoming the Russian aid was a bit lowered from presidential to prime minister. But it was all done to create a positive image of 2 basically authoritarian regimes in Moscow and Beijing. The same could be said for Hungary and their president Viktor Orban, but I won't go into details. I want to focus more on the NATO. It seems to me that we have a paradox here, with a minimum of actual details and information and the maximum of maximal quantity of stereotypes. Everyone has an opinion about the NATO. But with the assistance of Serbian claro-nationalist, anti-Western and pro-Russian forces, and the money and propaganda that comes from the East, the perception of NATO are mostly negative. The things have been fixed in the 1999, and the current Serbian authorities, they are talking about the NATO as a serious partner in situations when for example, Secretary General is together at the meeting with the president, but mostly of the time it seems that it's not enough to change the collective perception about NATO. I'm stressing the negative perception here. Serbian politicians prefer to avoid any serious discussion and detailed analysis of the benefits that Serbia could have, God forbid, if with full participation and membership in the NATO. And they rely on their concept of political neutrality, military neutrality. I would expect if this concept is observed, I would accept that with the same effort, they block some brutal attacks on NATO that were inspired by the Eastern countries. I have not seen adequate responses when it comes to reverse actions, when some activists of NATO are criticizing Russia. It does not really. It is not important that that you take neutrality, but Winston Churchill has it is important that you are on our side. What I can conclude is that Serbia is neutral on the NATO side, but contrary. Part of the explanation or criticism why this happens belongs also to NATO. The change of perception that were created in 1999 requires serious effort, requires appropriate details and information by using different resources of soft power that NATO has at its disposal, but I think it's my impression that they are not using them enough. To see the example of Montenegro, where the campaign was done seriously and it gave serious results. I have not seen such a campaign, not for membership in the NATO, because NATO respects the concept of military neutrality, although my personal opinion is that this is a vague, unclear concept that does more harm than benefits. But even NATO, on its behalf, should take responsibility for when it comes about the perception of the NATO in Serbia. That perception is the perception about the NATO is most often negative, and it will require time and effort to change that. And in order to change it, it requires the first step. Thank you, Mr. Jaksic. You have given us quite a different approach from the previous two. I would tackle the second round of questions. We cannot skip the pandemics of COVID-19. This is something that I have mentioned in my introductory part. I would like to ask General Vitale. We have said when the crisis started, you did not have opportunity to get accustomed to your new positions, and you're coming from Italy that suffered, and I give you my sympathy to all those who lost their loved ones. In these very difficult times, some people suspected the solidarity in the many questions, ability to help and protect. How did NATO come out from this crisis?
Fala for your kind words for my country. Actually, there was a really unexpected and unpredictable crisis that happened. And talking about myself, as soon as I arrived, I had only the opportunity to meet some key leaders, and then COVID burst immediately in the scenario. And as you know, I stay in Belgrade during the time I was in touch with my family, with my country, so deeply hurt from the COVID-19. And living in Serbia in this difficult time, when people are looking at this leader in the way in which they can manage those kind of crises, allow me to show the way the Serbian authority and leadership managed the crisis, and would like to take the opportunity to congratulate Serbian authority and the President Vučić that managed so well the situation, allowing his people to pass throughout in a way safer during this pandemic. But I have to add a little bit another thing. As Italian, I have to say thank you to Serbia. And the solidarity, you were talking about solidarity, kindness, generosity of this country to my country, we will never forget. And that was something that really moved me. And I would like to thanks again all the authorities, the president, the government, and join the ambassador Carlo Locascio in expressing our gratitude for that. COVID-19, 2 days ago, our Secretary General, launching some reflection to NATO 2030, said that COVID-19 changed definitely our life in a way we could never imagine, showing some new challenging, amplifying some others, and showing that they are bigger, that we can touch, we can tackle us alone. And that implied the concept of solidarity. We cannot act alone any longer. What Alliance has done during this period? Actually, the allies stand in solidarity in facing and in responding the pandemic. And the alliance and the military, the allies military personnel have been, I would say, crucial in helping the civilian effort and in some way in strengthening their capacity to be resilient and facing this humongous disaster. And how we can do that? In, for example, setting up a field hospital, delivering equipment, sharing medical expertise, providing and organize strategic airlift, trying to develop some innovative responses to better face this crisis. And there is a point that I would like really to underline and to stress well. This kind of response is, in my opinion, the best way to better coordinate the effort, to avoid duplication or redundancies, and to be able to deliver timely the aid when it's urgent and needed. And personally speaking, I think that the NATO did this kind of job. The cooperation during disaster, natural disaster, crisis, it's something that we can and we must push also in the future, because the cooperation among us in facing this kind of disaster is helpful for everybody, because it refers to the safety of everybody, so it's of capital importance. And for example, throughout the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordinating Center that is active 24 hours a day, NATO and Serbia have done a lot in that respect in order to be more prepared to face this kind of disaster. Because it goes without saying that disasters do not see a border or recognize geography. So it's something that can hit seriously everybody. Just to give you some overview of what we have done, fundamentally we have worked on transporting medical personnel and delivering equipment and material all across the alliance, organizes more than 350 strategic flights, delivering 100 or maybe 1,000 of tons of material to many member countries. Then we have worked in delivering and sending help to the region where we are deployed. For example, Kosovo, for example, Afghanistan. Just to have an idea, in Kosovo, K4 delivered to both the major Mitrovica North and South equipment and masks and gloves and test kits and some other very useful equipment. And around the municipality, if I'm not mistaken, 14 municipalities received humanitarian aid from KFOR, acting in conjunction with charities and the International Red Cross. We delivered also as Alliance equipment in this region. For example, Turkey has delivered to Serbia face mask, overalls and test kit, if I'm not mistaken. And in addition, working under the auspices of the NATO Framework Educational Institutional Program, Czech Republic and Serbia have worked together in developing a new kind of medical mask, the top quality level medical mask. And that has been done under the auspices of NATO. In the frame of the NATO Science for Peace and Security program, for example, in this frame, for example, NATO is acting in combination with other international organizations, including the European Union. For example, Italian and Swiss scientists are working in order to provide a new kit of diagnostic for COVID-19. And in doing all those things that it seems to me quite a lot, and in standing with the main word, the key word of solidarity, I would like to close my intervention in saying that NATO has continued to fulfill all its engagement all around the operational theater. So during all the pandemic, NATO remained fully committed in Kosovo, in Afghanistan, on the other theater, and their soldiers guaranteed the fully operational capability in their activity.
Thank you, General.
We understood from the answer of Mr. General that NATO was rather active. This activity referred to the members of the NATO alliance and the countries where NATO is present. That is why he mentioned the Kosovo and the assistance to Kosovo. Mr. Kostic, last year we had an exercise, I think the largest of that kind made recently, compared to one 2018, where we had exercise with the Ministry of Interior and partially with the military forces, armed forces, reaction to extraordinary situations. That was a 40 countries participated, 2,000 participants were there. Secretary General Mr. Stoltenberg with Mr. Vucic, the president, was there. And we learned at that time that there is this Euro-Atlantic center that helps in such situations. Have we ever used the services of this center, and what do we do in such situations? Thank you. I'd like to, in the very beginning, point out that I absolutely agree with with General Vitale regarding the insisting on the importance of the regional cooperation and in facing the global health crisis that we have had recently. You're right, Mr. Zivulovic. In September 2018, Serbia, for the first time, was a host of a great field exercise in the field of extraordinary situations organized jointly by the Ministry of Interior of the Republic of Serbia and NATO, Euro-Atlantic Center for the Responses in the Case of Disaster, which means EADRCC. The cooperation of Serbia and NATO in the field of such disaster situations and responses to such situations has lasted for many years already. Our teams jointly participated also in 2016 in Montenegro in such exercises, 2017 in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this field of cooperation is extremely useful, both for Serbia and for NATO, I presume. As for the activation of such mechanism for Serbia, due to pandemic situation in Serbia, we were not among the countries that requested the assistance through this response coordination center because we had the situation under control. What we did, EADRCC mechanism was activated in September 2016, and we received adequate help when it comes to problems relating to migration crisis. As for pandemic, the competent Serbian authorities have taken adequate and timely measures and actions, and fortunately enough, the situation is under control. During the extraordinary situation, the priority objective was to maintain the necessary capacities to adequately respond and protect the most vulnerable categories of this country, of this society. The activities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were primarily focused on the return of our citizens from other countries and repatriation of these citizens to our country. It is very important to mention the support that the international partners provided to Serbia. First of all, through the engagement of China and Russia, and as well as EU countries through the donation of by buying some equipment for us and transferring their expertise and knowledge to Serbia. Serbia also, in line with its capabilities, did its best to also return some kind of help to our partners, to the international community. That would be all. Thank you, Mr. Kostic. Mr. Jaksic, how do you view the crisis time at the international level? I try to be brief and concise, because this topic has been pondered upon at length, and volumes of books were written on this topic. It's not easy to say something new. But anyway, I would like to give a wider perspective of what is really going on regarding this pandemic. All of these are challenges that we will be facing, and the NATO will be facing as a part of this global environment. Well, COVID-19 is an active protagonist, in fact, of the political, economic, and social engineering of post-corona world. I agree with the impression of those that claim that we are in the midst of the biggest crossroads of the so far flow of the events in the 21st century. Whether we're going to use this opportunity that was opened by COVID-19 to make the world more just, socially speaking, and to provide ecologically safer future for the population. What kind of globalism do we need in the future, and how much of it do we need in the future? What will be the lessons learned by the West that has been led for years by its own greediness and by its by being burdened by its majesty profit? Would it provide the possibility to, as it had to China, to become the superpower country confirmed by the recent events, not only as the producer of medical aids and medical material, but also in terms of social and political affairs? We will strengthen, will we have the strengthening of capitalism in the future or not? It's very difficult and maybe too early to give answers to, full answers to the effects of the pandemic. However, with certainty, we can already state that there have been certain negative tendencies that were brought by the pandemic that are actually good for the populists, which means the growth of nationalism, protectionism, and the growing autarky in the economic point of view, strengthening and returning of the borders. Then the animosity towards green policies. None of these changes, for sure, are not welcome. As for the US, Donald Trump personally contributed to having the USA prestige and impact, or as the leader of a so-called free world, declines at the global level. EU during pandemic, at least in first days, was absolutely bordering only with the fact that they needed to remain together. Today, it's a little bit better. They're trying to keep their 27 pieces together. And all the growingly aggressive communist regime in Beijing could be said to be solitary, had a solitary victory of pandemic. I don't know how long this will last, because we are facing the situation where Trump has opened, and his administration opened, the second Cold War against China, and that the EU, regardless of the fact that it's trying to be mild when it comes to criticizing China, taking into account this daily trade of $1.4 billion on a daily, mark my words, daily basis. Regardless of those interests, the EU will obviously derive some conclusions that it is very dangerous to, well, there is a danger or hazard of becoming dependable upon China due to the production of medicines and drugs and other material coming from this country. COVID-19 also had its effects on the foreign affair streamlines, including Serbia, where actually, when it comes to China, it was allowed to strengthen its position in the whole region of West Balkans, while Brother C undoubtedly contributed to Serbia's getting further and further from the EU and turning towards East, with the stress on China, maybe more today than before, compared to Russia. In these global tendencies, the analysis of pandemic showed that we have become afraid of technological consequences when it comes to the private freedom, individual freedom, tipping, using all the mechanisms to follow people, to listen to them, using all these technological innovations to monitor individuals. And there is a fear whether people this modern technology will not be abused. We are hoping, at least, that we'll soon have this diminish. However, the joint factor of all crises might be said to be the proliferation of different theories explaining the events in this or other way, and many charlatans are given the opportunity to increase fears among the population and spread their own ideas of what is really going on. I would like to conclude with the mild warning given to the others that charlatans include some presidents as well in their group. Thank you, Mr. Jaksic. We heard so far something about the cooperation between NATO and Serbia, the trainings, IPAP exercises, educations, other kinds of trainings. I'd like to ask our participants in the debate whether they have anything else to add when it comes to the relationship between Serbia and NATO, whether they have any comments. And I'd like to ask you to freely say both negative and positive opinions. I would like first to ask Mr. Kostic to address us.
Firstly, I would like to tackle with two aspects. The first one being the dialogue between Serbia and NATO when it comes to Kosovo situation, Kosovo and Metohija situation, and I would like to tackle upon the issue of the public perception about NATO, or rather the public diplomacy, which was addressed by Mr. Jaksic previously. A very important segment of cooperation between Serbia and NATO, which also affects the perception about the alliance itself, is the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, which presents the major political and security challenge for Serbia. Serbia and NATO are obliged, according to the UN Council Resolution 1244 and the Military Technical Agreement Treaty from Kumanovo, and that's imperative for Serbia, which Serbia showed and proved in many occasions. Serbia expects from NATO that to understand and to comprehend our priorities, especially those related to Kosovo and Metohija. We think that only compromise solution, which has been reached through dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, with the support of international community, can secure continuous peace and stability within the region. Also, Serbia expects that to fully implement Resolution 1244 and consequently KFOR with the same composition and to remain statutory neutral to fulfill its mandate within the province. KFOR is the only legal and legitimate military formation in Kosovo and Metohija, and a serious guaranteeing the implementation of the Brussels Agreement, and it also guarantees the survival of the Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija together with all their heritage. The public diplomacy field is often identified as the weakest part of the cooperation between Serbia and NATO, and it requires additional effort on informing the scopes of this cooperation. When it comes to public diplomacy, Serbia is fully committed to clearly informs the public about the cooperation and the essence of the cooperation between NATO and Serbia, about the results and what is our interest in this cooperation. Thus, it is not about promoting NATO. That's not our task, or NATO does not expect that. But responsible activity that will be presented in the best possible way to our public, and the main criterion of such presentation has to be truth and facts. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kostic, and I would kindly ask Mr. Jaksic to say some positive, some negative things about what we've heard so far. If I were to underline and draw a conclusion, common conclusion, there are many positive aspects of cooperation between Serbia and NATO. However, still, my impression, which has not changed, is that these positive aspects are somewhere in tunnels and underground, buried underground, and the entire cooperation between Serbia and NATO seems to me as an undercover operation where Serbian party primarily avoids in all possible ways to speak about that cooperation in public, and this should be changed, and that's your job, gentlemen. It's not mine. Thank you for these positive aspects and criticism. I would kindly invite Mr. General Mr. Vitale to make his own comments. Thank you.
Hvala. Being a soldier, I would like to offer you my military perspective and touch upon a little bit about KFOR at the end of my speech. As a soldier, as a general, as a commander, I must be able to rely on the troop on the ground. And that implies that I have to be understandable from my soldier. I have to be able to understand them, regardless of where they are coming from. I'm saying that because that leads me to the word of interoperability that Dr. Kostic will touch upon before and previously in his intervention. This is a key word for us as a soldier, mainly, because the interoperability is the key of the success of any operation, of any international operation. And in that respect, NATO brings this interoperability to Serbian forces. NATO trained Serbian soldiers to reach the needed level of interoperability in order to take part to several missions, UN and EU-led, such, for example, in Central African Republic or Lebanon, etc., etc. In doing that, Serbian officers are becoming more and more valuable in the respect of the other soldier. And the Serbian armed forces is extremely well considered all over the world. I would say that this result is partially deserves some merit from our side because we deliver such kind of training. We exchanged our experience with the Serbian soldier, and it's one of the best results we can reach as a soldier and as an organization that are cooperating each other. When we used to say that the cooperation, the partnership is mutually beneficial, try to explain why we are saying. It's mutually beneficial. Some example. On one end, there is Serbia. Serbia can choose among a huge quantity of activity, more than 1,600, according to their needs, to their demands. They exchange unit with us, they visit our headquarters, they receive a lesson in the field of the educational program. On the other, NATO, for example, took fully advantage of the expertise of the Serbian medical team, very well known for their expertise, helping us as NATO to train, for example, Iraqi forces medical team. This is the proof that the cooperation is mutually beneficial. This is something extremely factual and extremely concrete. And in addition, we spend a lot of money, we say millions of euros, working side by side with our Serbian colleague in destroying obsolete and very dangerous ammunition in this country. So, trying to summarize, we learn each other. Simply that. We learn each other. And this is the spirit, the genuine spirit of the cooperation, at least in my acknowledgement. But if I may, few words, I will be very brief regarding KFOR, just because KFOR means something for me. To us also. It's my personal memory because it was my first mission, and I will never forget. I will remember forever. I was younger. I was lieutenant colonel. I was a commander of an artillery group, and I spent roughly 1 year in Goraževac. And honestly, I learned a lot during this period. I still remember the name of the major, Gospodine Božidar Krstić. Maybe he was a really kind person. I would love to meet at least once in the future. My soldiers were extremely appreciated by Serbian people. They established a really excellent relation with them. And just to say only one thing, when my soldier remade completely the main square of Gorazvac, people literally, I mean dozens of people come to me asking to call the square Piazza Italia. And that is something that moved me literally. But I would stop to bother you with my memory. And just to touch upon KFOR was previously mentioned. I would like to assure everybody who are listening to us that NATO has been, will be fully committed in performing its task. Our soldier is operating, and will operate under the clear mandate given by UN Security Council Resolution 2844, guaranteeing the freedom of movement, ensuring the safe and secure environment throughout all Kosovo. And I quote more or less what the Secretary General said in the past, we strongly support the EU-sponsored dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina as the only lasting political solution on the region. We really believe that this is the only way to overcome some historical disagreement and then to move forward into the future together. That's all for my side.
Thank you, General.
Hvala. Thank you, General. This is our last question, which is the military neutrality. Is this an obstacle for cooperation between Serbia and NATO? Does it burden the future cooperation? So I would kindly invite our participants to respond. Mr. Kostic first. Thank you. Very often in the media and professional public circles, we hear the opinions on how Serbia is crawling to NATO, sliding to NATO, has this hidden agenda about that. I have to underline that this is not the fact. Membership of Serbia in NATO is not an issue for Serbia, however, not an issue for NATO. Partnership is something. The politics of military neutrality is not our only towards NATO, but all other military alliances. This is our clear opinion that is respected both in the West and in the East. We fully respect the decisions of our neighboring countries to join the alliance, the NATO or some other military alliances, and therefore we expect to be fully understood that we want cooperation with the countries that are not NATO members, all aimed at military neutrality, policy of military neutrality. The activities of Serbia include military exercises with non-NATO countries, with individual countries, NATO members will continue. Legal and political framework for this military neutrality is the resolution on the National Assembly. Such policy and Serbia's decision not to join any of the military alliances has been confirmed in many parliaments of Serbia. This resolution is legally binding, but at the same time, in academic debates and discussions, there were some different discussions about the concept of neutrality and military neutrality in particular. What is the most important is that the fact that policy of military neutrality is an integral part of our foreign affairs and foreign policies, and is clearly stated by the government. And this was confirmed by our highest officials, and Serbia remains with this option. Thank you, Mr. Kostic. Mr. General, is this military neutrality an obstacle for NATO for cooperation between Serbia?
Let me repeat. We consider our partner Serbia as an important and very valuable partner of the alliance. And we fully respect his sovereignty and military neutrality. We have been always very clear and consistent on this point, and with our Secretary General, with many NATO officials, and now with myself. NATO respect is every sovereign country, the right of every sovereign country to choose his own destiny without any kind of interference. So Serbia is a sovereign country, and it is in its right to choose its own arrangement, and we respect it. And this is of capital importance for us. It's definitely the most important point, to respect the right and the sovereignty of each country. And we need a prosperous and economically strong Serbia for guaranteeing the peace and stability in the region. And we are glad to see that Serbia is moving very well in this direction. But at the same time, we can say that one can be military neutral and partner as well. We have several examples. I think about Austria, Ireland, and even the neutral Switzerland, that showed us that we can be military neutral and partnering with us at the same time. And finally, fundamentally, NATO doesn't seek new members or force any kind of membership. He has a so-called open door policy for those who wish to become members or wish to join the alliance. Serbia choose, it's up to Serbia to decide if it wishes to, in which sense you want to address its foreign policy. And we respect it, definitely. In the meantime, we can cooperate, we can strengthen our partnership, well knowing that we are partners and you are military neutral. And that I would like to underline. Thank you.
Thank you, General.
Mr. Jaksic, we know that you actually said for yourself that you're not expert in this area, in the military area, but I think that our listeners would like to hear your opinion about the Serbian neutrality and possible obstacles to our cooperation with NATO. Thank you. It'd be easier to answer this question because the decision on neutrality is a political decision, and the basis of this decision is something that is relying on political interests, not military, strategic, tactical, or any other. it's obvious that at the time when NATO becomes more successful in rounding the area of West Balkan with its membership, it's also at the same time more successful when it comes to EU. On the other side, we will have the resistance to such kind of inclusion and homogenization of West Balkans by, from behalf of Russia. As Russia is understood to be the holy protector of Serbia and its integrity and sovereignty of Serbia. At the same time, military neutrality is actually the favor to Russia in order to avoid a conflict. And as long as Kosovo, which is the beginning and the end of Serbian foreign politics and policy, is not ended and not actually resolved from this agenda, Serbia will not dare make any more brave or decisive steps towards the alliance in such an association as NATO is. Thank you. We're coming towards the end of this debate. I hope it was not too long for you, and we did not take too much time for you. And I would like to ask the members to say a couple of sentences, as that would actually be a message for you that listened to this debate. Again, I would like to refer to Mr. Jaksic to give us these 2 sentences he finds important as a message. We mentioned 4 in the change of perception when it comes to NATO. In the beginning, I would like to include the element of confusion. We need to broaden this question. How come that NATO is at the same time a guarantor of the safety of Serbs in Kosovo at the time when NATO at the same time wants to destroy Serbia, as our tabloids are writing? So let's at least make this confusion public. Thank you, Mr. Jaksic. Mr. Kostic, can you hear your comment? Well, for the end, let me just give a message that the Republic of Serbia will continue to build on its position as a responsible, dependable partner for Serbia, for NATO, with the joint aim in joint interest to secure and the stability and safety in the territory of Serbia, and also in the territory of the whole region. Thank you, Mr. Kostic. Let us send as a host, finally, to give a word to our friend and host from Italy. Give us, please give us a message. How do you see the relationship through these debates, Mr. General? The floor is yours.
Thank you for asking me also to conclude this very interesting, exciting, and for me, very fruitful discussion. And I really thank you very much, you all, for participating with me and allowing me to say my point of view. I can only deliver this, and I only 4 months now since my arrival in Belgrade. Serbia means solidarity. I can say this as Italian and as NATO, mainly as NATO officer. Solidarity, respect, and a key actor for stability in the region. And NATO sees Serbia as a reliable, responsible, and very valuable partner. Thanks.
By this, we are ending this debate. We'd like to thank all the participants in the debate that actually shared their time, free time, and actually participated in the event. I hope that Corona in the future will allow us see each other face to face rather than have these online sessions. Thank you all. Goodbye.